This week's show is brought to you by Media Temple. Whether you're looking to migrate a business-critical site or application to the cloud, Media Temple is your trusted team. Their experts can help you move to the cloud, maximize application performance, and find peace with your infrastructure once you're there. Visit MediaTemple.net to learn more about all of their managed cloud services and to unlock the full potential of your virtual private cloud or the public cloud.
Today's sponsor is Datadog. If your business is being driven by software, you know today's applications are more complex than ever. They're sitting on multiple layers of infrastructure and distributed services, and it can be very complicated to manage. Datadog brings visibility into every part of your infrastructure, as well as APM monitoring for your application's performance. Customizable dashboards, collaboration tools, and alerts let you develop your own workflow for observability and incident response. And Datadog integrates seamlessly with all of your apps and systems, from Amazon Web Services to Kubernetes to MySQL, so you can get visibility in minutes. You want to get started now? Go to datadog.com/cloudcast to get started with Datadog and get a free t-shirt.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast, coming to you live from the massive studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Just me tonight. Aaron is coming back from an airplane. He's somewhere over the Midwest. Won't be able to make it tonight, but a lot of really good show we have this evening. It's that time of year where we're sort of getting into the fall season for trade shows. We're getting into a lot of announcements from vendors. We're seeing, this is sort of the time when a lot of shifts start happening. So a couple of housekeeping things, and then we're going to jump into a very interesting show. Real quick, want to thank a lot of folks. I had kicked off a new podcast that's very focused on containers and Kubernetes called Pod CTL, so POD-CTL. A lot of good uptake this week. Got around number 100 or 105 or something in the iTunes technology section. So thanks to everybody for listening and telling a friend. Second thing regarding iTunes, Aaron and I are kind of doing this experiment to figure out how iTunes does some stuff. So if you would do us a favor, if you like the show, if you listen to the show pretty regularly, just go in and give us a rating. If you like it a lot, give us a good rating. But we're just trying to get a sense of like how they rank the shows and what weights it and so forth, because it's not anything that's disclosed to us. So if you listen a lot, go into iTunes, give it a rating, give us some sort of feedback. Even if you don't write anything, that'll help. If you want to go to the serverless conference, this has been in the show notes. We haven't really publicized it much, not on purpose, just kind of forgot. If you want to go to the serverless conference, which is coming up in New York City in the early part of October, there is a link in the show notes for 20% discount on that. Always a good show. We've been doing some stuff around serverless. We'll crank up some serverless stuff in October when that gets going. But if you want to go to the show, it's in New York City. There's 20% discount code in there from the folks at A Cloud Guru. And then finally, there's some stuff we're going to be doing in 2 weeks, and that'll be a little different look to the show, a little different feel to the show. We're going to kick off a bunch of new things just because it's 6+ years and we want to do some new stuff. So I'm telling you that now, just so you pay attention. I know people got kids going back to school, and VMworld's coming up, and lots of things going on in your life. So if you see some things different here the next couple of weeks, don't be surprised, and we will dig into a little bit more when we get to that. So speaking of VMworld, this is always the time of the year where we see what's going on in that part of the world, that part of the ecosystem. It's very important. It touches a lot of companies, both on-premises in their data centers and emerging in the cloud and so forth. So we sort of like to bring our experts in the VMware community on. I've got both Keith Townsend and Stu Miniman joining us tonight. Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you, Brian.
So first off, let's kick it off a little bit. Guys, what are you doing? Keith, I know you're doing something that's somewhat different, so why don't you tell folks what you're doing these days, and then Stu, tell us what you've got going on around VMworld and everything Wikibon and theCUBE.
So I've always had one foot in the FTE world and another foot in the analyst/blogger world. I've decided to leave the FTE thing completely behind, and I've kicked off the CTO Advisor as a full-time gig where, I do a combination of analyst work where we do the traditional vendor side support and custom content, as well as advising end user organizations. So, I'm 2 weeks into that and having fun.
Good. And I know you're doing a bunch of stuff, sort of daily stuff for videos and other sort of content content. Tell folks where they can go find it, especially the stuff you're doing for video they can go watch every day.
Yeah, doing the CTO Daily Dose, which is hashtag CTO Daily Dose. If you're on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, if you search for the hashtag CTO Daily Dose, you'll find me. The easiest place to find me is thectoadvisor.com. I've created a whole video tab where you can go and consume that content. It's basically about 8 to 10 minutes, a coffee cup worth of content where I, talk about topics, anything from cloud to Kubernetes to optimizing cost and IT. I've been having a ball doing it.
Very cool. Stu, we were kibitzing before the show. You were on in, I think, number 129. So it's been just a little while. Obviously, you and I talk all the time offline. What's going on in your world and what's coming up in the next week or so?
Yeah, it's great to be back. 3.5 years. VMworld's one of our big shows of the year. Going to have, we'll do somewhere between 60 and 70 interviews, which really is like pretty much our largest of the year. We've got a full team of analysts that'll be there doing meetings. I'll sneak in a couple of meetings, but I tend to get tied down to the CUBE video for a lot of it, be kind of putting together our whole presence there. We got a really big team, including happy to have Keith back as a guest host of the CUBE, bringing him, Mr. John Troyer, who most people in the VMware community know real well, and a new guest host, Justin Warren, who many in the community probably know, but he's going to be joining us too, as well as John Furrier, Dave Vellante, myself, Peter Burrs from the analyst side, and Lisa Martin. So we've got a phenomenal lineup. Excited to have everybody from Pat Gelsinger and Michael Dell on the program, through a bunch of end users, the community people, and a good, really broad piece of the ecosystem there, because VMware is a nice broad ecosystem. It's interesting coming in the fall. We start here with VMworld, and a couple months later, I'll be back in Vegas for AWS reInvent, which has really grown much larger than VMworld and takes up a lot of the visibility in the marketplace. And one of the things I know I'm going to be looking at next week at the show is that partnership between VMware and Amazon, where that's gone and how they're fitting in with some of the other cloud players.
Yeah, very cool. So for folks, I think a lot of you know, I've had some background working with Stu and the guys at theCUBE. Put on a great show, great basically week of keeping you up to date, what's going on, a lot of behind the scenes interviews with executives, with the engineers, with the product managers. So, great opportunity, whether you're watching it live or you want to go back and watch, 8-10 minute segments. Just a great chance to sort of dig in beyond all the keynotes and the headlines and stuff, and kind of see what's really going on. And Stu mentioned John Troyer. John, I think, was on the show last week or the week before, co-host of the Geek Whisperers and huge presence in the VMware community for a long, long time. Guys, Stu, you mentioned AWS reInvent. About a week or a few weeks ago, the folks from the Register kind of threw out a barb at VMworld and VMware, saying, you guys used to be kind of the center of the universe. Your show and your ecosystem used to be the center of the universe. It's now sort of become a planet that orbits AWS, or the IT world sort of orbits AWS. What's your, the Register always has a little bit of snark. We all sort of understand that. But where is the VMware? Where is VMware in the bigger picture of the IT ecosystem? What does the VMware ecosystem look like these days? John Troyer a little while ago used to say, well, we used to be Switzerland, now we're Switzerland with guns, because they've got a whole lot of their own products. Like, where is the VMware world in 2017?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. And this year, and all the shows I go to, virtualization's usually pretty important. Take, for example, I was at the Veeam show down in New Orleans, and Veeam got up there and they said, we rode the 10 years of virtualization, and now we're going to ride the next 10 years of cloud. At all the big infrastructure shows from the storage players, virtualization is important, but everybody is trying to figure out how they fit in this hybrid or multi-cloud world. And one of the things I know I and many of us have been looking at for the last handful of years is, what's VMware's position in that multi-cloud world? There was some snark on Twitter looking back as to some of the top 10 people I don't want to see at VMworld, or a comment I made is remember some of the old slogans back a couple of years ago. It was like any app, anything, one cloud. And even at the time, it was like, what do you mean there's one cloud? Come on, there's more than one cloud, when we look at the big clouds. So where VMware fits with the big public clouds, with their service providers, where Dell overall and that whole family fits in that environment is still a really hot question. That being said, VMware is still dominant in the data center. They're doing really well. This week they announced their latest earnings. They actually pre-announced because they beat expectations. They're doing well. They're hitting on all cylinders. Their stock is up. Pat Gelsinger is still CEO. Yeah. Last year, a lot of us were like, okay, who's the next CEO? That was just the rumor du jour. And, Pat's going to be there giving the keynote, and, VMware's doing well. So, the rumors of their demise is maybe a little premature. But that being said, when I look at the overall picture, Brian, definitely, Amazon gets way more press. If you turn on financial channels, the public cloud players get talked about a lot. Most companies you talk about are way more concerned about how they're playing with Amazon and Microsoft because VMware's kind of a given. But, we saw Microsoft go through a downturn in relevance and fight their way back. So, where will VMware, will they do anything to kind of move the needle at this show? Or will it be that they just keep raking in licensing, growing in interesting areas like AirWatch and vSAN and NSX? And it's a great community. It's one of my favorite shows. Really, really good people there. I know Aaron's going to be there, so even if he couldn't join us today. But lots of good stuff.
Yeah, Keith, what's your take? Any kind of different takes on it, or kind of areas that you're kind of going to go dig into when you're out there in a week or so?
So VMware is a interesting part of our ecosystem, not just from a vendor and industry perspective, but from a customer perspective. VMware moves at the speed of customers. If you notice a few years ago when OpenStack was going to kill, everything that was vSphere, VMware shifted and started to, offer, something that was similar to OpenStack and their OpenStack distribution. And then there was this rush to cloud in a sense, but a lot of the people that I talked to on the ground, while AWS was extremely interesting, AWS just, and still today, hasn't really figured out its position in enterprise IT. They'll most definitely take a credit card from the CMO or any other group and service enterprise IT, but when you talk about integrating and being, the next Microsoft, the next VMware, the next Oracle, who's cemented in enterprise IT and processes, AWS just isn't there yet. And VMware still has that trusted role to say that, if I'm a data center manager, if I'm a storage manager, if I'm in these traditional IT silos, I can go to good old trusty VMware and get the most interesting technology that I'm interested in today. Brian, you work with enterprise customers all the time. There's kind of two speeds. There's the cloud native speed that runs really fast. There really hasn't a lot of use for VMware today, but the majority of IT is still stuck in this legacy mode that VMware is obviously owning and still doing well in. So while they're not getting a lot of the press, they're still getting an awful lot, obviously, of the data center dollars. So they're still super relevant. We'll see that at VMworld this year. I'm sure there'll still be over 20,000 people. There will be a lot of hoopla. But again, this is not, their role today isn't to necessarily innovate and lead the way.
Right. You guys are both, Keith, you're now sort of at least more formally, and Stu, you're full in the analyst business, which means to a certain extent, you're going to go dig into their numbers. VMware just released their numbers, I think, literally a couple hours ago, so you probably haven't dug into them too much. But there was a couple of interesting things I noticed just real quick reading the summary of it. They talked about, their numbers were good. I think they were up about 10 or 12% year over year, or quarter over quarter, year over year. So that's healthy. They were sort of in the low single digits a year or so ago. I thought it was interesting. Their licensing numbers, I think they said, were up 15, 20%, which is interesting because one of the things that sort of surprised me when I looked at that Register article was they were saying, VMware is still at, ESX 6 something, like 6.5 or something, which tells me like there's no innovation in the hypervisor anymore, but yet they're getting all this revenue out of licensing. Are they raising the rates on the virtualization side of the house, or are they just loading up these ELA contracts and licensing contracts with all this new stuff? Like, how do people interpret, where this growth's coming from VMware?
Yeah, and Brian, I haven't had a chance to parse everything yet, but some of the numbers out there is like, vSAN year over year is up 150%.
Okay.
NSX is supposed to be $1 billion of revenue this year, and year over year is up 40% for the quarter, and the end user computing is up 20%. So those were their kind of three big growth areas. And one of the things we'd poked at, actually, one of the years you were hosting with me, it was, okay, is it an ELA where they're shoving people into vSANs? And most of the customers I talked to were probably VMware customers, but they were actually adopting the ELA because it was attractive for them when they were going to use vSAN to use the ELA. So a little bit of a nuance there. I think it's a good trend for VMware. While there's been plenty of years where I hear people griping about, the vTax or how VMware's squeezing them, or, gosh, how expensive it is to be a sponsor at VMworld. In general, vSAN's growing real good. NSX is doing well in the AirWatch stuff. And all of that is leading to some, stickiness in the licenses. And I think that is helping them kind of raise that piece of it. So, absolutely. I think, VMware knows that they've kind of hit almost a plateau on the virtualization. I mean, what are we at? Somewhere 80-90% of all applications are virtualized. So right. It's no longer hey, we're 50%, we're going to go towards 100%. We've pretty much maxed out a lot of that wave. So they've done a pretty good job of moving into some other areas.
Yeah. Keith, one other thing about the note. Michael Dell is so confident that VMware is undervalued that he's initiated, $1 billion stock buyback. So, remember last year there was all of this, as soon as it goes through, they're going to sell off VMware. Michael figured out the finances, he knows what he's doing, and he's very bullish on VMware as a big piece of the portfolio. Yeah, Keith, I know you're on a sort of a first name basis with Michael, which is cool. It would be great to figure out, and maybe this is a question you guys can ask him. I doubt you're going to be able to get an answer from it, but like, it's a weird situation now where Dell is private. Obviously, they don't have to share their details, but VMware is public, so you can to a certain extent see where they're making cash, see where like Stu, like you said, they have enough cash to go do stock buybacks, but the stock structure is different. It's Dell owns a huge piece of it. I guess the question to sort of figure out is, is VMware back to being a huge cash cow, and does that make them a cash cow for R&D? Because we've sort of established, well, maybe they're not necessarily an big innovation leader anymore, or is that a cash cow to go drive the economics of the rest of the Dell family? I mean, do you guys get any sense of what that's looking like, or is that completely quiet and off the record?
So that's a pretty good question. You asked Michael this. I think John asked him this at Dell EMC World, and I've asked him this on in private DM messaging that I don't think it's obvious he's talked about this quite a bit. One, what he hasn't talked about is this whole stock thing, which I find fascinating. Just the way the deal was structured. I have to go back and dig into what it means now that this tracking stock, which was at one point, quote, USA Today called it kind of worthless. If you bought EMC at the time, you'd get the VMware tracking stock basically for free. So from a cash cow perspective, I have to just look back at how brilliant of a move that was. One, it was tax-free and a bunch of other stuff, and how that frees up cash for Dell. So buying back $1 billion in stock. I'll have to put my analyst hat on and go back and dig it and see the impact of that on Dell EMC's bottom lines. However, the R&D question is a very good question. From a innovative piece, Stu, we've talked about how Michael has come back and said, you know what, if you thought I was going to sell VMware, you don't understand math. and what the whole point of why we bought Dell EMC. VMware is the crown jewel. If you look at traditional enterprise IT, HPE, Cisco, Dell EMC, probably the only company in all of that that's even relevant to the cloud and software conversation is VMware, and this other part of Dell EMC that Dell got when they purchased EMC, which is Pivotal. So I think a lot of the R&D effort we're going to see, you talked to James Waters. We had him on the CTO Advisor podcast a couple of months ago at Dell EMC World. They're very bullish on integration of Pivotal and VMware. So marrying those two together, I thought at some point VMware would just outright buy Pivotal back from Dell EMC. But Michael is very, very bullish on combining the two software entities he got in that acquisition of Pivotal and VMware to push this envelope on what a traditional enterprise IT can do in a cloud era. I mean, if you look at just the business of anything that you would say that's futuristic and interesting, Pivotal and VMware.
Yeah, and if you are a VMware stockholder, or if you were a VMware stockholder, those days after the acquisition when VMware stock went from about $80 to $40, and everybody, like Stu, like we said, we were wondering, how fast Pat was going to be out the door. Stock's back up to $100. So somebody's made a lot of money on VMware stock over the last 12 to 18 months, and probably are fairly happy. Probably have a boat or a beach house or something something it didn't have in the driveway a couple of years ago.
Well, yeah, and doesn't Michael Dell own most of that anyway?
Yeah, well,
so
exactly.
He's even happier.
Well, so. it's like Larry Ellison said, this is a great deal for Michael Dell.
He's going to make billions off of this.
Right. So you guys, between doing theCUBE and then some of the access to the executives through analyst meetings and other stuff, you get some access to them. There's things like the vExpert events where Gelsinger's hanging out. Obviously, some of those are controlled by PR and so forth, but do you guys have any questions that you're like, man, I really wish I could ask this one, but I don't think I'm either going to have enough time for it, or it'll get shot down? I mean, are there any sort of like big elephant in the room questions you wish you could ask Pat or Michael or anybody kind of driving what's going on, Sanjay Poonen?
So I guess it's actually something I asked Brian, like even back when Dell pre-acquisition. One of the criticisms I'd have for Dell is they tend to partner with a lot of people, and therefore I don't feel that they're necessarily the ones driving the technology conversation. Mm-hmm. So if I look at this hybrid cloud world and what will it look like at the end of the year? Well, I'm going to have VMware on Amazon. I'm going to have Azure Stack from Dell. There's probably going to be some Google thing in the mix. They're going to work with, dozens of service providers. So, at the end of the day, Michael Dell's going to be really happy if people are buying Dell servers and pulling along all of the software that necessarily goes with that. So, VMware and everything is great, but, do they have an opinion as to which way they think things are actually going? We hear some criticisms about all of these solutions. What's actually going to be working on VMware on AWS. Azure Stack seems pretty limited at day one. It is pretty locked down solutions. So, customers want that guidance and they want somebody to help deliver that. And, maybe Dell's going to leave that up to the channel partners and fight it out there. But, I usually like a little bit more opinionated delivery so that you can say, this is the way we think it's going. And, here's a leading solution from us. But, Dell's playing across the board.
Yeah, I think so. Keith, before you jump in, one thing that's sort of interesting to me, and this is sort of connecting a few dots. I know, like Azure made an announcement. It kind of didn't get a lot of buzz, but if you were digging into it at one of their conferences here a couple of months ago, where they were talking about they're going to start incenting their channel and their salespeople to sell Azure, not just licenses but consumption, right? So in essence, you're going to see a whole bunch of salespeople trying to push these deals where it's going to use a lot of VMs and it's going to use a lot of storage and a lot of Azure stuff, as opposed to where they used to just sort of bundle licenses and hoped you use them. I'm sort of surprised, given that VMware did their VMware on IBM's cloud and then they did the AWS cloud part, that there's not a VMware on Azure or there's not a VMware on GCP deal at this point. I would have thought they would have tried to be as ubiquitous as possible on that.
I think technically, we've seen just publicly the public beta of VMware on AWS was delayed a few times from when it was announced. I looked at that and just said, you know what, if you understand AWS VPCs at all, and you think about what it would take to get NSX and layer 2 networking that VMware lives on, that vSAN needs inside of an AWS data center, or even a GCP or Azure data center, that stuff is really, really hard. And it wasn't a surprise to me that it was delayed. I'll be amazed at when it is rolled out, and if it's anything better than what vCloud Air, because we have to ask the obvious question. You know, when we ask a question and get a straight answer from Dell EMC and VMware, how is VMware on AWS any different practically than vCloud Air?
Right.
You know, other than connectivity, you know, obviously there's going to be lower latency to AWS data centers and regions, but functionally it's the same solution. So that is, I think, a question I'd like to get a straight answer for.
Be interesting to understand how they manage a customer who asked that question: should I go to a vCloud provider or should I go to AWS? I did not, in my real quick view, I didn't see any numbers broken out. I don't know if it's become GA yet, so I don't know if they're breaking out any numbers. But it would be interesting to get a sense of, you know, what does VMware's sort of cloud revenues look like? Not the stuff that's sort of like vRealize cloud management, but the stuff that's going into the cloud and so forth. So I don't know if they break those numbers out at all.
Yeah. What Brian, you're saying I want a software company that can play across multiple clouds, maybe nicely integrated with Kubernetes. Could you find somebody that could do something like that?
Well, I'm not trying. No, I'm really not trying to throw any shade on that. I think what I'm getting at is,
I wasn't trying to throw shade. It just, you know, when I look at the multi-cloud strategy, I mean, you know, plug for what you've been working on, the OpenShift piece is, you know, you want Amazon, check. You want Azure, you know, recent announcement on that, you know. Does it integrate with Kubernetes and everything Google's doing? You know, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the multi-cloud picture that people are looking at, and you know, we'll see if VMware adds any. You know, that we've had a little bit of container movement from them, but I don't hear much traction there. Right. And people looking at Kubernetes, you know, will that show up?
Yeah, so the Kubernetes thing has been interesting.
So Stu, we'll have both the vSAN guy and the NSX guy on theCUBE. And a question I'm going to ask is, how does vSAN, how does NSX help me with the cloud? Honestly, you know, when we talk about what's interesting about the cloud, so customers already spoke with their dollars and feet. They didn't want vCloud Air, not in the way that VMware did it. We want cloud native capability. How does NSX, how does vSAN help me with cloud native?
Well, yeah, Keith, you bring up a great point. The Cloud Foundation Suite, when I've talked to, you know, partners of VMware that have been looking at deploying it, it's not necessarily fitting into those architecture models, and it's heavy. You know, when you look at how many servers do I need for compute, how many servers do I need for management, this is not a, you know, small solution that you spin up and start with. This is, you know, a much larger solution, and, you know, it's not at the agility and price point that people think of when they think of cloud.
Keith, I know you've been digging a little bit into Azure Stack and taking this a little off the VMware radar, but I know you've been digging into Azure Stack. I know you've been looking at it. I mean, do you get a sense that may be an offering that may draw people away from using VMware, either in their own data centers to sort of pull them away from the vCenter thing, or it'll be a, you know, kind of a gateway drug to get them to use something like Azure?
So Azure Stack, I know you guys did a podcast on Azure Stack a little bit ago.
Oh, it's been a long time, though. It's been 12, 18 months, and we're still waiting for it.
And when we had Jeff Snova on the CTO Advisor a few weeks ago, we talked through this. You know, it's not geared to compete with vSphere. Just it is Azure in your data center. However, that's extremely appealing. And you talked through kind of how Microsoft is selling on consumption-based. they actually charge you. A component of how they charge you is based on how much you're actually running. So how much you're consuming, consumption based rather. So, you spin up, an Azure cluster can hold up to, let's say, 400 VMs. And you're actually charged for what you consume in your own infrastructure. So it's a very different model than what VMware provides. But again, it's a subset of Azure in your data center. So I'll soon have Kubernetes integration. I'll have the PaaS capability of a SQL. I'll have the basic infrastructure as a service. And I'll go to a console and I'll just select, instead of running it in the Oregon data center, I'll be running it in my New York data center, which is my private facilities. So that, I think, is compelling and in a sense is a drug to get you onto Azure and Azure Stack. I talked to a huge professional services company last week, global, that rolled out Azure Pack that are one of my favorite beating horses, which a private cloud solution. They built it, no one came because it wasn't feature rich like an Azure was. Mm-hmm. So Azure Stack, they're very hopeful that they deploy that, and their internal customers come to that because obviously it's a subset of Azure and it doesn't break that workflow. So two different solutions, but I think something that VMware and AWS combined should, and every other cloud provider should worry about.
Yeah, just Brian, the one little bit of feedback I'd add there is, from what I hear, Azure Stack, like we were just talking about for VMware, is not geared for, kind of even the mid-size enterprise. It's really priced pretty high. And if Microsoft could get that price point down, most of the applications running on VMware are Windows. So, while, people would love, to have a similar operation model to vCenter, I talk to lots of customers, if you go to kind of the mid or small size, that don't want vCenter and don't need vCenter. So if Microsoft could hit that lower price point, they could really, pull a lot of customers away with relatively little friction.
And I talked about this on the Daily Dose today, which was that cloud control plane. Brian, you deal with this all the time. That's really heavy. From a CPU and memory and storage perspective, it's just a lot of overhead. It's difficult to manage from a people and process piece. That is the true value in most of these solutions. This is why vCloud Air failed. This is why AWS, Azure, and to a lesser extent, GCP are succeeding, because they take away that overhead. That's why the interest in Kubernetes is so strong, because it's the part that the developer really cares about.
Right. Well, and people don't realize, in order to make the economics of that huge control plane and all those services that clouds deliver, it's a lot of boxes that are running, a lot of high availability boxes. And when you start smashing that down into a stack that goes on-prem, and somebody says like, hey, these first 10 boxes are going to be your control plane, people start going, and they start, you got to have the economics to sort of make it, economics of scale to make it work. And it definitely is interesting. Let me hit you guys up with one last topic that I know is both right in your wheelhouse, Stu, yours especially. A couple of years ago, or even a year ago, people sort of joked that VMworld had sort of become sort of a storage world because everybody was trying to be storage or VMware. Now that's shifted over to HCI. You've got Nutanix, you've got EMC's got to play there. Cisco just bought a company around this space. HP has bought a couple of companies around this space. Like, what's going on with HCI in terms of, is it kind of becoming the dominant data center thing? And do we really need all these companies doing kind of the same thing?
Sure, Brian. Storage has always been a very fragmented marketplace. Wikibon, we were pretty early at looking at this. We believe that, the era of the storage array is going to switch to not be as many storage arrays. So therefore, if, storage world at VMworld, a lot of it becomes HCI. That being said, there's still plenty of storage arrays out there. There's lots of companies still pushing, the storage boxes, especially the all-flash arrays. But from an HCI standpoint, VMware's got a great position there. We've talked about vSAN a couple times. Actually saw a blog post that went out this week from VMware saying that a large portion of their internal IT now runs on vSAN. Of course, the hardware is mostly the Dell, which is the VxRail configuration. So if VMware can run most of their IT on vSAN, that's pretty interesting. Of course, we want to dig in and understand what they're doing with Oracle and things like that, because licensing and performance and everything is something that we'd like to understand a little bit better. But if HCI is becoming a major piece of storage, should there be 2 solutions or 12 solutions? Well, in the storage market, there's 30 or 40 decent sized companies. There might be 5 or 6 that are of the bigger size, and as you said, Brian, all of the major players have lined up with their own solutions, and a lot of them are software defined. So Nutanix has that balance of what they sell versus what they sell through the Dell OEM. They're working with Lenovo. They're trying to get on other platforms like HP and Cisco. They support them, but HP and Cisco don't because they've bought their own solutions. NetApp put out there what we'd like to call not HCI because it competes against HCI, but architecturally doesn't match our definition. Brian, your company, Red Hat, came out with an HCI. Yeah. And yes, Cisco, it was funny, Brian, last time I was on your podcast, we were talking about the launch of Whiptail. And I guess what I would say is I predict that SpringPath will be a better acquisition than Whiptail, but it's a really low bar.
Yeah. So lots of co-opetition, lots of, vendors being friends and then maybe not being friends. And at the end of the day, people are, we joked years and years ago, this show was kind of originally started to focus on converged infrastructure back when things like FlexPods and vBlocks and stuff were getting built. And now, 6-7 years later, it's actually physically getting mashed together. You don't have lots of separate boxes. You just have software control planes. So that's about right. It's a 6-7 year evolution for technology. And that'll probably be a big part of this because it's the next refresh of the data center, I guess.
Yeah, Brian, I'm just wondering if serverless will come up in the show. So
yeah, I do want you guys to ask some serverless or ask some container questions, see what's going on there. Get back to us. We'll have to have you back on at some point to get back to us. But guys, any last words before we sort of cut it off for tonight? What's the one thing you're really looking forward to, or the one thing that will surprise you if you don't see it?
Well, the one thing I'm looking forward to, VMworld, I don't get there for the announcements about technology anymore. You know what? It's literally still about the people. You can get the content online. You can get all the announcements from blog posts, people live blogging. VMworld is still that center of traditional enterprise IT, people who are on the ground solving 80 to 90% of the challenges that we see in the data center. So I'm still jacked about having those hallway conversations, finding out how people are stretching this technology and fitting it into their everyday lives and just, fighting this whole thing that we're called digital transformation, how they're fighting that battle. I'm still super excited about just the hallway conversations.
Yeah, and I definitely echo that. I was reading a blog post today from Mike Bouchon, and he said people aren't sure about digital transformation, but there is no doubt that there is digital disruption. And it's definitely hitting, the VMware ecosystem. And always interesting to see, how some of the people that were the early people, putting things together and fixing them for VMware, how many of them are still around and how many are off doing, cool new things. Brian, like yourself, you at least used to be a expert.
I've broken out of that orbit at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't even renew myself. So it's there's over 1,500 vExperts now, as opposed to I was reminiscing. I've been working with VMware for 15 years now, and it's been an interesting arc to watch.
Yep. Well, I'm evidently still a Dell EMC elect for whatever reason. So I appreciate getting nominated and getting it. But that's a whole nother podcast, I think, on just these vendor influencer programs.
Very cool. Well, guys, listen, as always, great to sort of dig through the chaos a little bit. I think we got a few things answered, and hopefully we'll get a lot more answered next week. Best of luck going through all the interviews. Stay hydrated. Try and keep your voice for a week. I know that's always tough, but have fun in Vegas, and thanks for being on tonight. And folks, with that, we're going to wrap it up for Keith and Stu, and for Aaron, who should be back next week. We're going to wrap it up, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.